My name is Melty. I'm the director of OXY ARTS. We're so thrilled that you're here for Tiffany Barber's curatorial walkthrough. This show is open through December 13th, and we have one more event in November. It's a performance dance event, so welcome to join us for that. And without further ado, Tiffany Barber and Flesh of the Forest.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming. Thank you. This exhibition is the result of, I'd say, 2 years of research around the world. It has a global focus and a global and a local focus. There are a lot of Los Angeles-based artists in the show, but there are also a lot of artists that are from the Black diaspora more broadly. And one of the things that I was thinking about with the show was not only how the forest and African American or Afro-diasporic traditions of landscape get erased from art history and museum practice, but also the ways in which artists of African descent are engaging the forest as a site of memory, of terror, of whimsy, and all manner of being and sensing. And so the exhibition design also mirrors that in a way. If you've walked through the exhibition, you can tell this is a kind of like, this is like the light part, like maybe like the daytime, or you're entering the forest before you get into the kind of thickness of it. This piece here is by Alicia Pillar. It's a site-specific commission. It has reclaimed materials from her own practice. She's an LA-based artist who goes on urban walks around Los Angeles and wherever she is, and picks up things, detritus, and transforms them into sculptures and installations. And this installation also features manzanilla branches, which are fire resistant and native to Los Angeles, and they thrive in inhospitable environments. And so as a metaphor for thinking about climate catastrophe, which is also another through line in the show, and how artists are responding to their own environments, whether that's their studio or the cities and urban and rural and forested areas where they live. There's also a soundscape that's part of this commission. This is a kind of canopy, and I wanted the first piece to kind of engulf or invite and engulf the viewer and transport you into the space of the forest, and then that becomes more pronounced in the other gallery. But you can also hear a kind of brown noise, somewhat ethereal, but also if you were to imagine yourself in the forest, what kinds of sounds you would hear. And so thinking about that and how air might brush past your ears or your face or something like that. So it's kind of thinking experientially also about the exhibition design and the artworks that are here. These two pieces are by Sydney Kane, who just finished their MFA in painting at Yale and are now based in Philadelphia, but is from the Bay Area. These two works are from a series that Sydney was already working on that's actually I think just closed in New York, or this might be the closing weekend, at their gallery in New York, called The Forest is the Water. And so Sydney is engaging directly with the forest, whereas Alicia made a work that was responding to the prompt of the show. Sydney's work was already thinking about the forest as a site where blackness and darkness coexist. And you can see in the palette, these, the other works from the series, The Forest is the Water, Sydney's playing with charcoal and different textures of blackness on the canvas, and where blackness might be luminous on the canvas, under light or under darkness. And here you can also see some of the like jewel tones, I guess you would call them, peeking out. And when I designed the exhibition to pick these colors, I didn't know that these were actually on the work because I hadn't seen them yet. I only saw reproductions, and so it's really beautiful that these kinds of like the kind of emerald green peeks out, and then this fuchsia magenta that matches or complements the color of the wall. But this is the kind of more brighter space. We have also the reading and engagement space, which you're welcome to please offer your thoughts or sketches. There's a sketchbook here, and there's also books on the shelves that represent where my thinking is and was in the course of developing this exhibition, and thinking about other folks in literature and theory and practice, in history and environmental justice that are thinking about the forest also. So yeah, do you have any questions before we move into the darkness? The threshold, before we cross the threshold? No? Okay, let's go. I should say about Sydney. Come. There's plenty of space. With Sydney's work, one of the other through lines of this exhibition is that there are a number of artists that are what you might call emerging artists, or this is like one of their first shows. This artist is one of them. Another one of those artists, this is Jerome P. Dent Jr.'s work, and Jerome is actually an academic and a film theorist, and has been moving into a practice-based practice that is thinking about the theoretical concepts that he addresses in his work around blackness and horror. He writes on horror films. And so these works are black glass sculptures that he made that are thinking about the body, the skin as a membrane, and how it registers harm or pain, or any kind of not impetus, but what is the word I'm thinking of? My words are failing me right now. But any kind of encounter with another force and how that might register on the front or the back of the sculpture. And so these were meant to be picked up, but for the sake of safety, we ended up propping them up so you can kind of see them in 360 as you walk around, and the way that the light casts on them. And there's also a beautiful blues that pop out on some of them, a kind of like indigo blue that's pearly, but also thinks about or references water and fluidity, which relates to both of these works. And this is the absence of water. But this work right here is by Ruben Telushkin, another kind of emerging artist. This is a kinetic sculpture. It's actually motion activated. And so it will be, there are moments in the gallery where it's actually completely silent. When this syncs up with that, and there's no sound, which is a really beautiful moment, because it's like kind of when you're in the forest and there's like a pause and you're like, whoa, what's gonna happen? And then everything starts up again. And so there are these moments of syncopation that happen also in the exhibition in terms around movement and sound and the visual material. But this is, like I said, motion activated, motion sensor activated, and it is a scroll that combines quilted found materials that are a reference to Kefié, as well as camouflage and the kind of military industrial complex. And the piece is called Free the Land, and it references a 1960s era Black nationalist movement that also became, that also teamed up with Palestinian rights and other global justice movements at the time that continue today. Ruben is Black and Jewish and based in Detroit, and so is thinking about his own activism and his own role as a scholar, artist, activist with this work. And as you see, as the scroll continues, there's a little part that's starting to fray on the edges, around the edges, and it's getting caught, and so it will continue to kind of unravel over the course of the exhibition. Where should I go next? We're going to just turn to this because I was like, oh, water, the absence of water. These sculptures are by Simpiwe Ndizube, who actually lives in Highland Park, not too far from OXY ARTS, and is South African born, just outside of Cape Town, and grew up in post-apartheid South Africa, and so his artwork and practice inflected by his experience in post-apartheid South Africa and now living in Los Angeles, and the ways in which the landscapes of South Africa and California mirror each other, Cape Town and Los Angeles in particular. And these sculptures were actually in his lawn, sited on his lawn in his home, at his home in Highland Park, and they respond to the weather, and so they were eroding slightly over time, and then they actually bear right now the kinds of evidence and remnants of decay that were part of their encounter with the high winds that Highland Park experienced during the January fires. These are also, are metaphorically also a kind of sunsetting or a decay of and rebirth in his own practice, where he's leaving behind these kinds of more sculptural, fantastical forms and moving into more maybe traditional flat-based, two-dimensional work, painting. And then now he's kind of moving back, having explored painting, the painting language more directly, now kind of starting to move back and reincorporate these three-dimensional forms and sculptural forms into his work and trying to figure out what the balance is. But he created the most well-known body of work that he created, which this series is from, was this part of this kind of mythological world that he created that has forests and rivers and creatures that are hybrid, that are responding to their environments, and so kind of thinking about the forest and its kind of multidimensional nature and character.
Question, are those real cobwebs?
Yes, yes, they are. They are real, yes. Yes. Yes, I mean, these are living works. This is also this mulch. We wanted to install them on dirt all the way, but we didn't necessarily want to invite too many creatures into the space. So, Anansi is enough for us. Yeah. So the spider webs are intentional, and so over time, like we're not like necessarily cleaning these, and they don't require a lot of maintenance because they're in a controlled environment right now. But thinking about the indoor, outdoor, and how this, again, the environment, what we think of as our environment, and how we impact it, and how we are impacted by it, and what creatures and other species we might need to coexist with in order for that to happen in an ethical way.
What about the mushroom caps on top? Is that, am I reading that right?
Yes, you are. Yes. So mushrooms, obviously, I don't know about obviously, but mycelium networks, and that also relate to this, to the video on the other side of this scrim. And thinking about how fungi also emerge from inhospitable environments, but are also healing that environment, typically because they're filtering toxicity through their systems. And so this is also part of that. And so there's a continuum of decay, maybe a reference to rebirth, but still it's kind of suspended. So yeah. Any other questions? The mushrooms and the mycelium network, actually these two works on either side of Simpiwe are both in conversation with that concept, and again thinking about the other kinds of species that we might encounter in our environments that we have to live with, and that we might need to shepherd and or nurture and or move ourselves out of the way for them to do their work to better benefit everybody, every organism that's there. This artist is actually the impetus for the show, Mario Lewis. This project is called Forest Notebooks. This is a site-specific iteration of the Forest Notebooks. Mario was in residence in Los Angeles for a month and made these drawings. And these wood slats are from a salvage yard in Alhambra. And so thinking about Los Angeles, even though Los Angeles isn't necessarily, well, actually we do think, maybe not Los Angeles as a forested site, but certainly California, there are forests in California. But also thinking about the kind of locality of Los Angeles, and Mario's own relationship to the forests of Trinidad. He lives in Port of Spain, Trinidad, and he has land in the interior of Trinidad that is a forested area, and how he has had to develop new skills and sensibilities from being in the forest. He built a structure that was unsound and that had to be rebuilt, taken down, rebuilt, and so the wood slats are also a reference to building, remaking, unmaking, and the kinds of skills and sensibilities that we have to develop when we're encountering environments that are not our own or that we're familiar with. And all of these paintings and drawings are from the first series of forest notebooks that he made in Trinidad 2 years ago that was on view at a gallery. The other thing about Mario is that he's not an emerging artist, but he feels like that in his career because he was poised to kind of be this like art darling, and then he retreated from the art world and moved back to Trinidad and became a husband and a father and a teacher, and now he's returning to his practice full time after 24 years of being away from it. And so there's a certain kind of urgency and prolific energy to his drawing, and he's just he's very much immersing himself. He also is he's 90% blind in one eye. That he's in process of treating that, but that's also thinking about the other kinds of senses that he has to use in order to produce work. And he's made these drawings, not necessarily, but the first iteration of the forest notebook drawings that he made when he was in Trinidad were actually made by moonlight and candlelight in the forest. And so again, thinking about the senses, when your sight is compromised, what other senses you might need to, what other senses develop in place of that or to compensate for that or to supplement. And then also intentionally having to get down to the minutia of like being on the ground, drawing by candlelight or moonlight in a tent in the forest of Trinidad, and his encounters with all the organisms there. You'll see references to ants and slithering things and plant life and all kinds of other organisms that he encounters in the forest in Trinidad. And then there's a piece back here that is not to be missed also that is a kind of reference to, as you'll see in these forms, there's a reference to also kind of the galactical or the constellation or a system of civilization that might point to some kind of future world that we might need to inhabit.
When you say that it's site-specific, do you mean that like the combination of the slats and the painting is uniquely here, or do they normally are in the plate attached?
They are normally, well, the first iteration of this, he had wood slats that were taken from the forest in Trinidad, and they were hung, he had an entire gallery, so this is just a portion, but they were architectural, and they were kind of housed, and he made these sculptures, these kinds of troughs where he was displaying his drawings. But the site specificity is in terms of the wood, but also in terms of the drawings that he made. These are all drawings that he made here in Los Angeles over the course of his residency. And this is just a fraction of what he produced. He wanted this to be much bigger, and I was like, it's not a solo show. We can do this. Yes, we can do this. We can do that.
Like a lot of this stuff is like circles.
Yes.
Is that direct comments about his eye and the drawing?
You know, I don't know if he's thinking about his eyes when he's doing that with the circles, but certainly in terms of holistic or global, again, kind of constellation and galactical, he's thinking about systems and systems of relation and systems of existence, I guess. So there's like the spiritual piece, but there's also the material piece, and there's very much the kind of like spatial, and I mean that in terms of not just on the ground and building, but like space, what's beyond the earth, and what kinds of ancient or primordial forms we might need to turn to in order to continue to exist as humans, or whatever comes after us. And then this work, actually, let me talk about Josefa's work next. So we have LA, Philly / the Bay Area, South Africa, New Orleans, Trinidad, And then Josefa Ntajam is Cameroonian but lives in France, the south of France, and is, I mean, it's just really a treat to have this this video screening because she's all over the world right now. She just showed at the Sao Paulo Biennale. Actually, did you see her work when you were there?
I did. I saw it in the reminder, but I think it was somewhere else.
Okay.
It was like Sufi spinning kind of thing. It's not. Yeah.
No, she usually does. Like, she's also another one that wants the entire space, and I was like, I don't have it. I don't have it to give to you, but we would love to screen a video. And she's like, okay, I can do that. And so this exhibition, this work is called Matter Gone Wild, and this is sort of like self-portraiture. She's performing as these alter egos. That again, she's making these environments. She's drawing on like gaming techniques and video and 3D rendering and digital space, and it's not narrative, but it has texts that she recites, and she's performing as these characters that are responding to these environments, and the environments that she's creating in this video are both deep sea and deep space kind of colliding. And so there are all manner of like weird and wild creatures that emerge from that collision, along with her own characters that are also very narrating their experience of blackness, whether that's a black hole in terms of quote unquote science, or black matter and what the texture of black matter actually is, whether that's skin or a black hole in terms of space. Or her own practice and her own experience as a Black woman artist in the art market. So highly recommend sitting with this. Once the walkthrough is over, this will be at full sound. The other part of this is that the sound is meant to kind of vibrate the body, and so this is a very turned down version of this, but sound is very important for this artist as well, to think about, again, sound as an environmental element. Any questions? Okay, we have two more artworks. This is by, these two portraits, I guess you could call them, are oil pastels by Jonathan Barber, another very first time showing in an exhibition artist. So Josefa is a more established, certainly up and coming, but getting more and more press and visibility and attention, but much more established in her practice than somebody like Jonathan Barber. Same with Simpiwe, and so there's a good mix of folks who are, crossing the boundaries between established and emerging. Jonathan absolutely fits into the category of emerging, and these were commissioned for this show in particular. And this series is he's been making these hybrid forms that are comments on Black masculinity and different environments where black male bodies are not typically seen, whether those be pastoral and in poses where they're not typically seen in the 21st century, young black male bodies. And so kind of sitting in an idyllic environment, contemplating, having the time and space to actually just rest or just think or just be. And so he's been making these hybrid creatures and characters that combine the human form and the horse form, and these two works are unique in that they are also unicorns. So he's starting to kind of grow and build out his vision, and these are the most detailed landscapes he's also made, and these are the largest works he's made so far. So you can, when you get up close to them, you can see the kind of depth and dimension that he's working with. And I don't know if there are artists in the room that work with oil pastels. They're very hard to master, like very hard to like marshal on the substrate. So again, the skill that this takes is kind of incredible, and the focus that, there's not smudging, there's very detailed, the detail work is really sensuous in a satisfying way. And he's self-taught. I think he's the only artist in the show who hasn't gone to art school. So please spend time with that.
Fire or lava?
This is fire. just fire creeping up. I don't know why he put that there. I was like, okay, that's great. I was like, are you thinking about Los Angeles? I don't know, but I mean, it's interesting that what we an element that we typically think of as destructive or harmful in some ways, even though it can definitely facilitate rebirth, especially in a controlled burn context. But this creature is unbothered by this kind of incursion. So,
well, it's interesting. There's fire in this like bright color here, and then there's flowers in that bright color. That's similar.
Yeah. The oranges, yeah.
Maybe unicorns don't burn.
Maybe they don't. Maybe they're special. They have a superpower. Yeah. I wish he was here to talk about this because I don't know. But yeah. And then our last little work over here is the only formally narrative work in the show. It's by a short film by Rayson Velasquez, who is from Cocho, Colombia, which is on the Pacific side of Colombia, and it's on the coastal side of the forest. So there's coast, and then it's like immediately there's forest. And so this work is about it's a coming of age story about a young black girl, 13 or 14, who has to go into the forest to rediscover, reconnect with her ancestral roots and knowledge systems to save her community. And to overcome a kind of evil, I don't know, but shaman-esque character in the forest who's wreaking havoc on the community, causing illness and discord. And so she has to, again, like I said, connect with her ancestral roots and knowledge systems in order to correct that. And so you see her going through this journey. And then the other part of this is that Rayson's own kind of practice. He started a film festival in Choco that also elevates the voices and stories of black filmmakers, Afro-Colombian filmmakers. And the discourse around blackness in Colombia is really interesting because on the Pacific side, there are these kind of more ancestral and spiritual traditions that are retentions from the African diaspora and when enslaved peoples were in Colombia, but there's quite a divide between in the country that like the west side and the forest side is very much more about, again, a connection to land and a connection to cultivating land, and there's what's the name of it? There's like a kind of moonshine, I guess you would call it, called viche, that also is a libation that is poured and or imbibed when they're doing rituals and connecting with spirit, that has now become, on the east side of the country, a kind of like hipster commodity. And so there's a tension there that Rayson is also tapping into, that there's a kind of a whole world on the Pacific side that is thinking about blackness in radically different ways than the east side of the country. And so you'll see that also in this short film. So yeah. Any other questions? Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. We'll turn up the video. Yeah. We'll turn up the video so that you all can experience that. There's moments in Josefa's work that are actually quite intense, and it's very visceral. So I hope that you'll stay to encounter that, and then again, get up close, look at the artworks, listen to the short film, and I'll be around if you have any questions that you want to ask me while you're perusing. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much for spending time here.
Thank you.